I was serving dinner in the drawing hall. His friends were sitting comfortably, laughing and talking. I walked over to place a dish near him, and out of nowhere, he kicked me. Hard. Not a joke. Not a mistake. My hands slipped, and the dishes crashed to the floor. Food spilled everywhere. The sound was loud, but the silence that followed was louder. His friends stopped laughing. No one said a word. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding. He didn't apologize, didn't even look at me, like I was nothing, but something inside me shifted. In that exact moment, I stopped feeling small. I stopped feeling sorry. I looked at his face and knew I wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. He had done worse before, but this time he did it in front of people. This time he crossed a line he couldn't erase. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up the broken pieces in silence. He thought I would stay weak, quiet, afraid. But he was wrong. That kick didn't break me. It woke me up. I cleaned the mess with a calm face. I served the rest of the food like nothing happened. But behind that calm, something cold and steady was building. Not hate. Not anger. A plan. I wouldn't fight him with screams or tears. I would fight him with silence, with patience, with truth. He wouldn't even see it coming. He'd think the world was turning against him. But it would be me, quietly, carefully, pulling every string. To the world, he looked like a man who had it all. He smiled at the right time, dressed sharp, held long conversations about work and success. People admired him. They called him confident, smart, driven. Some even said I was lucky to have him. But they only saw the version he allowed them to see. No one knew the man I returned home to. The one who looked through me like I wasn't there. The one who treated every word I spoke like a mistake. He didn't raise his voice often. He didn't need to. He made silence louder than shouting. I'd speak, and he'd act like he hadn't heard. I'd ask a question, and he'd respond with a look that made me feel stupid. I remember once sharing an idea for a small business I wanted to start. He smirked, told me I didn't have the mind for things like that I should stick to what I was good at. That day, I believed him. And slowly, I started doubting myself. It was never about one big moment. It was about the little ones that added up. The way he corrected the way I sat, the way I talked, the way I laughed. He made me feel like everything I did needed fixing. If I disagreed with him, he'd shut down completely, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. He called it space. I called it punishment. I would find myself apologizing for things I didn't even do, just to get him to speak again. He made me question my own memory. If I said something happened, he'd swear it didn't. If I remembered his words, he'd say I misunderstood. Over time, I stopped trusting my own mind. I'd think twice before speaking, and when I did speak, I chose words that wouldn't upset him. I became quiet, not because I wanted peace, but because I was tired of the storm. He liked control, not connection. Everything had to be on his terms, where we went, what we ate, who we spoke to. If I wanted something different, it became a problem. He never hit me before that dinner night, but his control felt like chains. I stayed, thinking maybe if I tried harder, he would change. That maybe I was the problem. But I see it clearly now. I wasn't broken. I was being broken. Looking back, it wasn't love. It wasn't care. It was about power. About control. And I had given it to him piece by piece without realizing. But now I do. That mask he wore fooled many, even me. But masks don't last forever. They slip, and when they do, the truth comes out. Quietly, I had begun to collect mine. I used to speak freely, laugh without thinking, dance in the kitchen, sing in the shower. I was full of life. But slowly, without noticing, I changed. I stopped laughing as loud. I started watching his mood before I opened my mouth. If he looked tired, I stayed quiet. If he looked annoyed, I apologized before he even said a word. I began shrinking myself, bit by bit, trying not to trigger anything. I triple-checked every sentence before I said it. Not because I wanted to sound smart, but because I was afraid of sounding wrong. He had a way of twisting words, making me feel like I said something stupid. So I stayed quiet more often. It felt safer. I trained myself to avoid eye contact when he was angry. I learned which footsteps meant he was in a bad mood. I could hear the shift in his voice and know when to disappear. He didn't hit me, not until that night, but I still flinched when the door opened. I still held my breath when he entered the room. He didn't have to raise his hand. His silence, his tone, his cold eyes were enough. If I burned the toast, it was met with a long pause and a slow shake of his head. If I got excited about something and told him, he'd roll his eyes and say I was too sensitive. I began to believe it. Maybe I was too emotional, too needy, too much. I covered for him without even thinking. If someone noticed I seemed tired, I'd say I had a rough night. If someone asked why I was quiet, I'd smile and say I was just thinking. I gave excuses for bruises that weren't even on my skin. The bruises were inside, and I was the one painting over them. But after that night, when he kicked me in front of his friends, something changed. It was like someone opened a locked door inside me. I stopped shrinking. I started paying attention, not to him, but to myself. I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who never looked down, who didn't tiptoe around anyone. I didn't become louder. I didn't start shouting, but I began listening to myself. I watched his actions with clearer eyes. I saw the pattern I was stuck in, and I knew I didn't want to stay there. That was the moment the silence stopped being fear and started being strategy. After that night, I didn't scream or cry. I didn't pack a bag or slam the door. I didn't even mention what happened. I knew if I showed anger, he'd turn it around. If I showed hurt, he'd act like I was too sensitive. So I stayed quiet, not out of fear anymore, but out of focus. I became everything he thought I was, the quiet, obedient partner. I smiled when I had to. I cooked his meals, cleaned the house, folded his shirts exactly how he liked them. I listened to his long talks about his fake achievements, nodded at the right moments, asked the right question. He thought I was broken. He thought the kick had finally put me in my place. He didn't realize it had set me free. Behind the smile, I was watching. I paid attention to every word he said, every lie he repeated. I started writing things down, dates, details, moments that fell off. I kept records of his insults, the things he said when he thought no one would ever hear them again. I used my phone's voice recorder whenever he started one of his long, demeaning rants. I backed up copies to an email he didn't know about. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. A case. A plan. He never noticed. Why would he? He believed he had total control. He thought he was too smart to be caught, too clever to fall. That was his weakness, his arrogance. And it was my first real weapon. He often bragged about a city contract he was trying to win, a government grant that could take his business to the next level. He showed off the application documents, smiling like a king. He never mentioned that most of what he submitted was fake. I knew because I was the one who helped type it up. He dictated, I wrote. I read the lies with my own eyes, the fake credentials, the made-up numbers, the twisted timeline. He assumed I was too naive to understand what it all meant. But I did. I saved copies, took photos, forwarded them to myself. His own words, his own lies, all preserved. I didn't need to expose him yet. Not right away. I needed to be patient. The goal wasn't to hurt him in a moment of rage. It was to unravel him slowly, to let him keep believing he was winning. Let him keep thinking he owned the game, while I quietly learned all the rules. Each day I wore the same mask he once wore, calm, collected, untouchable. He thought I was defeated, but I wasn't broken. I was becoming dangerous. And the best part, he had no idea what was coming. He sat across the table one morning, smiling as he flipped through papers filled with numbers, awards, and promises. This grant, he said, is going to change everything. I nodded, silent, as he handed me his draft. Clean this up. Make it sound professional, he added, barely looking at me. I took the folder. Inside was a pile of lies, a fake resume with degrees he never earned, business claims that existed only in his mind, projects that were exaggerated or never happened, and every word was meant to trick the city into handing him money. I had written many things for him before, but this time I read carefully. I saw it for what it was: fraud. He didn't think I'd understand the weight of it. He still thought I was the girl who feared his anger, the one who stayed small to keep the peace. But I wasn't her anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't point out the lies. I simply typed what he wanted, formatted it neatly, and handed it back with a smile. What he didn't know was that I saved every version, every edit, every fake line he approved. I forwarded the emails to a separate folder only I could access. I saved the attachments, screenshot the drafts, even photographed handwritten notes he'd tossed aside. It all painted a clear picture. This man wasn't just abusive. He was a fraud, and soon, I'd make sure the right people knew it. I traced every inflated claim. His so-called employees? Ghosts. His contracts? Fabricated. His business earnings? Doubled, even tripled on paper. And still, he walked around like a king, convinced no one could touch him. He believed his charm would protect him. He trusted I wouldn't dare say a word. But silence is only powerful when it's loyal. Mine was no longer his. I created a trail so clean and complete that it didn't need explanation. It spoke for itself. I knew exactly where to send it when the time came. But I wasn't rushing. I wanted him to keep building his fake kingdom, brick by fraudulent brick. Because the higher he built it, the harder he'd fall. He used me to create his lie. But I would use that lie to destroy him, all without raising my voice. It started with an email. Not from my name. Not from my location. A clean, untraceable burner account. The subject line was simple: urgent, grant application fraud. Attached were files, all the fake documents, all the forged credentials, screenshots of his resume lies, and records of inflated numbers he had proudly called just business tricks. I clicked send and closed the laptop. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I had already mourned who I used to be. Now I was someone else. At first, nothing changed. He carried on like usual, smug, loud, always boasting. He wore his confidence like armor. But I knew better. I knew systems moved slowly, quietly, and soon enough, the silence began to shift. It started with a phone call during breakfast. His face went still. He stepped outside and didn't return for nearly 20 minutes. When he came back, his voice was flat. "Just business," he muttered, brushing it off. But I saw the tightness in his jaw. Then another call. Then 2 more. Emails that made him scowl. One day, a meeting he had bragged about for weeks was suddenly rescheduled. The next day, another meeting was canceled for. He told his friends it was politics. Told me it was jealousy. But the truth was crawling under his skin. I watched it all from the kitchen. Silent. Calm. Not asking questions. Just serving tea while the walls began to close in. Still, he didn't suspect me. He thought the world was turning against him by chance. That maybe a competitor had leaked something. He couldn't imagine that the betrayal came from the same quiet person who folded his clothes and cooked his meals. That's what made it so perfect. He underestimated me because he never really saw me. Some days, I caught him staring at his phone for long minutes, lips tight, thumb hovering over the screen. Other times, he'd pace the room, muttering under his breath. But he never spoke the truth out loud. He never admitted he was scared. That something was wrong. Because people like him don't confess. They pretend everything is fine until the floor gives out. And it was starting to. I kept my mask on. Sweet. Obedient. Distant. I watched as his confidence wobbled, as his world began to bend. All while I held the strings. He still thought he was in control. Still thought he was the master. But the truth was, I was the one pulling everything apart, piece by piece, in silence. And he didn't even know it. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The man who once walked into rooms with a confident smirk now dragged his feet. His charm started slipping. People no longer greeted him with the same warmth. He noticed it, and it made him restless. He began snapping at minor things. Emails, traffic, even a spoon out of place. His voice, once smooth and controlled, turned sharp and wild. He started spending more time on the phone, pacing from room to room. Most of the calls ended in shouting. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I was always nearby, quiet, listening. He didn't realize how careless he'd become. And he never noticed the phone I'd placed under the couch cushion or the tiny recorder I slipped into the drawer where he kept his keys. Every word, every insult, every loud, reckless rant captured. One night, during a particularly angry call, he slammed his phone on the table and turned on me. Blamed me for his stress, his bad luck, even the tone in my silence. He yelled like he was trying to scare me into fixing something that had already begun breaking. I stood still, not flinching, not responding. I knew then I had all I needed. The next morning, I clipped just one recording. A single moment, his voice raised, cursing his clients, threatening staff, speaking like a man who had lost control. I sent it from another burner account. No name, no trace. Just a message. You may want to listen to this. He's not who he pretends to be. I sent it to the board of directors at his company. I didn't expect fireworks. I expected silence. And I got it for a few days. Then he came home pale. Told me there was some kind of internal check being done. Called it routine. But I saw the fear in his eyes. The board wasn't calling him. They were watching him. And he didn't know why. He started drinking more. Sleeping less. Kept checking his email like it held a secret he was desperate to find. But he still didn't suspect me. He thought the world was turning on him randomly. That's how blind he was to me. Meanwhile, I smiled a little more each day. Cooked breakfast. Cleaned the kitchen. Watched him unravel slowly, exactly how I planned. Not with fire, but with silence, with patience. And with proof. I didn't reach out to all of them. Just one. The quiet one. The one who looked away when the kick landed, who hadn't laughed like the others, who had stayed silent. I sent a simple message. Can I ask you something honestly? He replied within minutes. We met in a cafe, far from his usual places. I sat across from him and asked, that night, did it look like an accident to you? He looked down, his fingers curled around the cup. Then he said, no, it didn't. That's all I needed to hear. I didn't blame him for staying silent before. I knew what kind of fear my ex planted in people. But now that fear was working against him. I asked the friend if he had seen other things at work, moments where that charm cracked, times he crossed lines. He nodded. It started spilling out. The inappropriate jokes. The cold threats. The bullying masked as leadership. Things no one ever questioned because of the way he dressed, the way he talked, the way he smiled when someone important walked in the room. I told him I was gathering evidence. He didn't ask why. He just asked how he could help. I guided him to the HR contact. Told him to report everything he'd seen, everything he could remember, not as my friend, but as a colleague who had seen too much. I stayed behind the scenes, quiet, hidden, but always watching. He filed the report. HR took it seriously. Why wouldn't they? A workplace witness is harder to dismiss than a partner at home. Now the story was no longer just mine. It belonged to his professional world too. I combined his testimony with what I already had, The emails, the forged papers, the voice recordings, the fake credentials. But now my case was layered. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It was misconduct. It was fraud. It was a man who built his success by stepping on people, until one finally stepped out from under him. He never saw it coming. He still thought his friends were loyal. That silence meant safety. But silence had changed sides. And this time, it spoke louder than ever. One truth. One voice. That's all it took to start the storm. He gets suspended. The city pulls back the grant. A formal investigation begins. Suddenly, all the confidence he used to wear like armor begins to fade. His phone rings less. His voice, once loud and proud, turns shaky. I watch as the man who once acted untouchable becomes uncertain of everything. And I stay just for one more week. Not because I need to, but because I want to see it. All of it. Each day, I follow the same routine. I wake up early. I do the laundry. I sweep the floor. I bake cookies that fill the house with a soft, warm smell. I don't ask questions. I don't bring up the suspension. I never mention the grant. I just move around the house like a shadow. He watches me, waiting for me to break the silence. I never do. He starts to fall apart in small ways. He forgets to shave. He leaves his clothes scattered. He talks to himself while pacing in the kitchen. Once, I hear him whispering names of people he used to call friends. Now they don't answer him. The ones who cheered for him, who laughed at his jokes, they've gone quiet. Just like he did when I needed him to speak. He doesn't know how to handle this kind of silence. The kind that comes with consequences. The kind that doesn't beg for attention or forgiveness. He snaps at the smallest things now. He spills coffee and blames the cup. He slams drawers because a paperclip is missing. His world, which was once full of control and confidence, is now full of cracks. I don't point them out. I just let him sit in it. Sometimes he tries to talk to me, starts a sentence, then gives up halfway. I nod politely, hand him his tea, and move on. He can feel the shift. I am no longer afraid, no longer tiptoeing, and that terrifies him more than any punishment from the city. One night, I hear him crying quietly in the bathroom. The door is shut, but I can hear it through the wall. That's when I know he's broken. Not because someone shouted at him, but because no one's fighting for him anymore. Not even me. The man who once made me small is now shrinking in his own silence. And I didn't have to lift a hand. Just patience. Just truth. Just quiet. And I'm not done yet. I leave the apartment while he's still asleep on the couch. His mouth slightly open, one arm dangling, unaware that this is the last time he'll ever see me. He's jobless now, humiliated, completely alone in the wreckage he created. And I walk out not with rage, not with tears, just silence. I don't slam the door. I don't leave a note. There's no goodbye, no last message to explain myself. I've already said everything I needed to, without a single word. My bags are light. I take nothing that isn't mine. Just the clothes I came with, my ID, my keys, and the weight that's finally lifted off my chest. As I step outside, the air feels different, free. I'm not the same woman he tried to control. I carry my name now like a shield. No shame, no guilt, no fear. Just dignity and strength. I know people will talk about him differently now. They'll whisper. They'll wonder. They'll see through that fake charm he used to wear like a mask. He kicked me, right in front of his friends. He thought that would break me, but I didn't need to kick back. I didn't need to scream. I just needed him to fall, and I watched him do it piece by piece. That's the thing about men like him. They dig their own holes. I closed the gate softly behind me. No rush. No panic. Just peace. Thank you for staying with me. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need to hear it.